There is a song in the Pink Floyd catalog that almost nobody requests, that the band themselves dismissed as a throwaway, and that may be the most honest thing they committed to tape in the whole of 1968. It lasts barely 2 minutes and 37 seconds. It was buried on the flip side of a single that never charted, and yet, listened to closely in the dark, it does not sound like a pop curiosity at all. It sounds like a seance. To understand what really inspired Julia Dream, you cannot begin with the lyrics. You have to begin with the calendar, because the timing is the entire secret. The session took place at Abbey Road on the 13th of February, 1968, during the precise weeks in which Syd Barrett, the man who had invented Pink Floyd, who had named them, written their hits, and dreamed their whole aesthetic into being, was being quietly, painfully removed from the band he had created. Julia Dream is the sound of that removal, even though it never says so. The song was written by Roger Waters. It was sung, for the first time on any Pink Floyd release, by David Gilmour, the very guitarist brought in to replace Barrett. Hold those two facts together, and the song begins to vibrate with a meaning nobody officially put there. The man who would inherit the band wrote a lullaby of fear and handed it to the man who had physically taken Barrett's place, to sing in a voice as soft and ghostly as a held breath. The replacement sings, and what he sings about is dread. That is not a coincidence you can hear once and forget. The imagery only deepens the unease. There is sunlight on a pillow, an eiderdown, a weeping willow, the gentle furniture of an English childhood bedroom. And then, threaded through it, the menace arrives. A velvet bride who is plainly a figure of death, a scaly creature lurking where the dreamer hides, and finally the dreamer's own whispered question of whether he is actually dying. This is not a love song to a woman called Julia. No Julia has ever been found. No diary, no girlfriend, no muse has ever surfaced in 50 years of obsessive Pink Floyd scholarship. And that absence is not a failure of research. It is the point. The dream is not about a person. It is about a disappearance. Consider what the band was actually living through. The founder was sliding into a psychological state from which he would never fully return. They had decided, with enormous guilt, to simply stop collecting him on the way to gigs. They were watching a friend become a stranger inside his own mind, watching the most luminous person any of them had ever known go dark, and they had no language for it, because nobody in 1968 had that language. So the grief went where unspeakable grief always goes. It went into a dream. Richard Wright understood this better than the lyrics did, and his arrangement is the proof. The mellotron he plays does not decorate the song, it haunts it. That instrument, with its wavering, slightly broken choir of taped strings, was the sound of memory itself malfunctioning, of something human stretched and warped until it became spectral. Wright turns a 2-minute pop B-side into a haunted house, and the ghost moving through its rooms has a name the band could not bring themselves to write down. Listen again to who is singing. Gilmour, the new arrival, performs the song with a tenderness that sounds almost like an apology, as if the understudy were standing at the edge of the stage, singing softly to the genius he had been hired to bury. There is no triumph in his voice. There is something closer to mourning, and mourning is a strange emotion to find on the B-side of a single engineered to sound cheerful. The contrast is the whole story. The A-side tried desperately to be a hit. The B-side accidentally told the truth. And here is the detail that reframes everything, the kind of detail that should make you stop the song and sit very still. Waters, who wrote these words about a dreamer, afraid of a velvet bride and unsure whether he is alive, would spend the next 20 years of his career writing over and over about exactly this, about absence, about the people who vanish, about the friend lost to madness, about empty chairs and missing men. Julia Dream is the first time that obsession surfaces. It is the seed. Everything Waters would later build, the long meditations on Barrett, the entire architecture of loss that would define the band's greatest work, is already present in miniature, in this discarded little nightmare from early 1968. He did not know yet that he was writing his life's theme. He thought he was writing a B-side. The tragedy of Julia Dream is that it is too honest for its own occasion. The band needed a hit and produced an elegy. They needed something light and produced something that still sounds, decades later, like a candle burning in an empty room. The song failed commercially, precisely because it refused to pretend, because underneath the dreamy surface, it was processing a loss the band would not openly mourn for years. What really inspired Julia Dream was not a woman, not a book, not a drug. It was a vacancy where a person used to be. It was the unbearable, unspoken fact that the brightest member of Pink Floyd was leaving, and that no replacement, however gifted, could fill the silence he left behind. So when you hear Gilmour ask, in that soft and dreaming voice, whether he is really dying, perhaps the question was never the dreamer's at all. Perhaps it was being asked, without anyone daring to admit it, about a man who was sitting alone somewhere in the spring of 1968, slowly becoming a ghost. So is Julia Dream truly a song about a dream? Or is it the first time Pink Floyd dared to write a requiem for someone who had not yet finished dying?